When a commissioner tells players they should be grateful while the league crumbles around them, you know something's about to explode. And that's exactly what happened when Napheesa Collier decided she'd had enough of Cathy Engelbert's corporate doublespeak. What came next wasn't just a press conference gone wrong. It was a full-blown exposé of how disconnected WNBA leadership has become from the very players driving the league's unprecedented growth in 2025. Somebody's lying, and the evidence is stacking up fast. Either Napheesa Collier fabricated an entire conversation with the commissioner, risking her reputation and career, or Cathy Engelbert stood in front of cameras and twisted the truth so badly that even seasoned reporters couldn't hide their frustration. The thing is, when you look at the pattern of behavior, the league's response to player concerns, and the way this press conference unfolded, one side of this story starts looking a whole lot more believable than the other. Before we dive into exactly how this all fell apart, hit that like button if you think players deserve better leadership, and drop a comment telling us whether you believe Collier or Engelbert. Because this controversy isn't just about one conversation, it's about the future of the entire WNBA. Let's rewind to how this powder keg got lit. The 2025 season has been transformative for the WNBA in every measurable way except one. Viewership shattered records, with games averaging numbers that would have seemed impossible just 2 years ago. Sponsorship deals flooded in. Arenas that used to have empty sections were suddenly selling out. And at the center of much of this growth, Caitlin Clark, whose rookie season brought tens of millions of new eyes to women's basketball before injuries sidelined her for several games this year. But while the money and attention poured in, something else was building beneath the surface: player frustration. Not about the growth itself, but about how leadership was handling it. The injury rate spiked dramatically, up 36% according to independent tracking. Yet the league's response felt inadequate. The officiating became inconsistent, to the point where players were publicly questioning whether refs understood the game they were calling. And through it all, players felt increasingly ignored by the very office that should have been advocating for them. That's the environment Napheesa Collier walked into when she had what was supposed to be a private conversation with Commissioner Engelbert. According to Collier's account, which she eventually made public after growing tired of the league's inaction, Engelbert suggested that players like Caitlin Clark should be on their knees thanking their lucky stars for what the league had done for them. The implication? That Clark's $16 million in off-court earnings existed only because the WNBA platform made it possible, not because of her exceptional talent and marketability. Think about that for a second. The commissioner of a league that's finally getting mainstream attention allegedly told one of its star players that another star should be more grateful. Not that the league should be grateful for having generational talents, not that they should protect and support the players driving this growth, but that the players owe the league. It's backwards thinking that belongs in a completely different era of sports management. But that wasn't the whole story. And what happened when Engelbert faced reporters would turn this from a private dispute into a public relations disaster. The press conference before the WNBA Finals should have been a celebration. Instead, it became an autopsy of leadership failure in real time. Engelbert stepped to the podium with the kind of prepared statement that screams crisis management consultant, full of soft language about doing better and valuing players. The kind of corporate speak that sounds nice but means absolutely nothing. When reporters asked directly whether she'd made the comments Collier described, Engelbert didn't give a straight answer. Not once. She called the reporting inaccurate without specifying what was inaccurate. She said there was miscommunication without explaining what was miscommunicated. She pivoted to talking about ongoing dialogue and collective bargaining, as if throwing around business terms could make people forget they'd asked a simple yes or no question. Watch any clip of that press conference and you'll see reporters getting visibly frustrated. Malika Andrews from ESPN tried multiple times to get clarity, asking point blank whether Engelbert said Clark should be grateful for making $16 million off court because the WNBA platform enabled it. Engelbert's response? More corporate deflection about respecting players and focusing on the finals. It was the kind of non-answer that actually confirms what people suspected. Here's what made it worse. Engelbert tried to position herself as the victim, talking about how her kids were devastated by the comments and how tough the week had been for her personally. That might have generated sympathy in a different context, but when players are raising legitimate concerns about league leadership and you respond by talking about your own hurt feelings, you've completely missed the point. Players aren't attacking you personally, they're demanding accountability for systemic issues. The contrast with Napheesa Collier couldn't have been sharper. When Collier spoke about the situation, she didn't sound rehearsed or calculated. She sounded like someone who'd reached a breaking point after trying to work within the system and getting nowhere. Her words hit hard because they came from lived experience, not a teleprompter. She talked about players going to battle every day to protect a shield that doesn't value them, about having the best players and fans in the world, but the worst leadership. That authenticity matters. Fans and players can tell the difference between someone speaking from the heart and someone reading damage control talking points. And in that moment, every person watching could see which commissioner they were getting. What happened next would shock everyone, because the response from players across the league made it clear this wasn't just Collier's fight anymore. The backlash erupted faster than the league office could draft another carefully worded statement. Players who typically stay quiet during controversies suddenly found their voices, and they weren't holding back. Social media lit up with current and former players expressing support for Collier and frustration with league leadership. The message was unified and clear. Enough is enough. This wasn't just about one alleged conversation anymore. It became a referendum on how the WNBA treats its players during the most successful period in league history. When you're generating record revenue and attention, and your players are still fighting for basic respect and proper working conditions, something is fundamentally broken at the leadership level. The injury crisis became a flashpoint in this larger conversation. When injuries spike by 36% in a single season, that's not bad luck or coincidence. That's a systemic problem that requires immediate investigation and action. Players pointed to increased physicality that wasn't being properly officiated, compressed schedules that didn't allow for adequate recovery, and a general sense that player health took a backseat to league growth metrics. Caitlin Clark's injury situation became symbolic of these broader issues. Here's the player who brought unprecedented attention to the WNBA, whose jersey sales broke records, whose games drew audiences that shocked even optimistic projections. And when she went down with injuries that kept her out of multiple games in 2025, the league's response felt inadequate compared to the urgency the situation demanded. Fans noticed. Players definitely noticed. But the most damning aspect of this entire controversy wasn't any single incident. It was the pattern it revealed. A pattern of leadership that talks about player empowerment while allegedly telling stars they should be more grateful. A pattern of celebrating growth while seemingly ignoring the player concerns that could undermine that growth. A pattern of corporate speak replacing genuine accountability. Players started openly questioning whether Engelbert was the right person to lead the league through this crucial period. Some called for her resignation outright. Others demanded structural changes to how player voices are incorporated into league decisions. The unity among players, even across team rivalries, showed how deep the frustration runs. And here's where it gets really interesting, because the person who might ultimately decide Engelbert's fate isn't anyone in the WNBA office. Adam Silver, the NBA commissioner who oversees the WNBA as its parent organization, suddenly found himself facing questions about whether he needed to intervene. Silver has built a reputation as a progressive, player-friendly commissioner in the NBA. He's handled controversies with transparency and generally maintained strong relationships with players and their union. Now he's watching the WNBA, which operates under the NBA's umbrella, spiral into a leadership crisis that threatens to undermine years of growth. The pressure on Silver to step in grew as the controversy expanded. If Engelbert has lost the trust of players during collective bargaining negotiations, that's not just a PR problem. It's a fundamental breakdown in the commissioner's most important relationship. You can't effectively lead a league when the players don't believe you have their best interests at heart. And you definitely can't negotiate a new CBA when one side thinks the other side's leadership is fundamentally disrespectful. Silver's silence on the matter has been notable. He hasn't publicly defended Engelbert, but he hasn't distanced himself either. That middle ground might not hold much longer, because this controversy isn't fading. If anything, it's intensifying as collective bargaining heats up and players realize they have unprecedented leverage given the league's growth. Think about the position Silver's in. The WNBA is finally achieving the mainstream success everyone hoped for. Sponsorships are rolling in. Media rights are up for negotiation with networks actually competing for them. The product on the court has never been better. And right in the middle of this golden opportunity, there's a leadership crisis that could poison player relations and derail momentum. Does Silver stick with Engelbert and hope the controversy blows over? Does he force her out and risk looking like he's caving to pressure? Or does he try to broker some kind of compromise that addresses player concerns while maintaining leadership continuity? None of these options are great, and every day he waits, the situation gets more complicated. The timing couldn't be worse for the league office, and that's putting it mildly. Collective bargaining negotiations are entering a critical phase, and player leverage has never been higher. When you're driving record growth and mainstream attention, you don't have to accept the same old terms. Players know this. They see the sold-out arenas, the sponsorship deals, the media coverage. They know their value, and they're done accepting leadership that treats them like they should be grateful for scraps. The current CBA expires soon, and the gap between what players want and what the league has historically offered is massive. We're talking about fundamental issues like salary caps, revenue sharing, travel conditions, and health benefits. These aren't minor tweaks. They're transformative changes that would bring WNBA player compensation and treatment closer to what their value actually generates. Now imagine trying to negotiate those changes with a commissioner that players openly distrust. How do you reach agreements when one side thinks the other side's leadership fundamentally disrespects them? The Collier-Engelbert controversy isn't happening in a vacuum. It's happening at the exact moment when player unity and trust in leadership matter most. Some players have already hinted that if their demands aren't met, they might explore alternatives. International leagues pay well, and while they don't have the WNBA's platform, they also don't have its dysfunction. The threat of players taking their talents elsewhere isn't empty anymore, especially for stars who have international name recognition and endorsement deals that don't depend solely on the WNBA. Caitlin Clark's situation illustrates the complexity here. She's dealing with injuries that have kept her out of games in 2025, but she's also built a brand that transcends any single league. If the WNBA's environment becomes toxic enough, players with her level of marketability have options. That should terrify league leadership, but based on Engelbert's press conference performance, it's not clear the message is getting through. The players driving the WNBA's growth aren't just asking for better leadership, they're demanding it. And if they don't get it, the consequences could reshape the entire league. So what happens now? That's the question hanging over the WNBA as 2025 progresses. Does Engelbert survive this controversy, or does the pressure become too much? Do players get the leadership changes they're demanding, or do they have to fight this battle while also negotiating a new CBA? And most importantly, can the league capitalize on its unprecedented momentum, or will internal dysfunction waste a generational opportunity? The answers will define the WNBA for years to come. This isn't just about one press conference or one alleged conversation. It's about whether a league that's finally getting mainstream attention will treat its players like the valuable assets they are, or continue operating with outdated thinking that belongs in a different era. Napheesa Collier took a risk by going public with her concerns. She knew it would create controversy and put a target on her back. But she also knew that staying silent wasn't working. Players had tried working through proper channels, having private conversations, raising concerns diplomatically, and they kept hitting the same wall of corporate speak and empty promises. Sometimes the only way to force change is to make the dysfunction public, to put leadership on the spot and demand real answers instead of prepared statements. Collier did that, and regardless of how uncomfortable it made people, it sparked a conversation the WNBA desperately needed to have. The question now is whether leadership will actually listen and change, or whether they'll wait for the controversy to blow over and go back to business as usual. Based on that press conference, it's hard to be optimistic. But the pressure isn't going away. Players are united, fans are paying attention, and the stakes have never been higher. If you think the WNBA needs better leadership, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our coverage as this story develops. Drop a comment with your prediction. Does Engelbert keep her job, or is Adam Silver forced to make a change? And let us know what you think players should demand in the new CBA, because this negotiation is going to determine the league's future. The WNBA stands at a crossroads. Record growth and unprecedented attention on one side, player frustration and leadership crisis on the other. Which direction the league goes depends on whether the people in charge finally start listening to the players who made this growth possible. Because without those players, there is no WNBA. And the sooner leadership understands that fundamental truth, the better off everyone will be. One thing's for certain, the era of players staying quiet and accepting whatever leadership decides is over. The WNBA stars know their worth, they have leverage, and they're not afraid to use it. That should excite fans who want to see the league reach its full potential. But it should absolutely terrify anyone in the league office who thought they could keep operating the same old way while expecting different results. The Napheesa Collier and Cathy Engelbert controversy exposed a truth the WNBA can no longer ignore. You can't build a successful league on the backs of players you don't respect. You can't negotiate in good faith when trust is broken. And you definitely can't lead a league into its most promising era when the people driving that promise don't believe in your leadership. What happens next will be fascinating to watch, and we'll be covering every development right here. The WNBA's future is being written in real time, and this controversy is a chapter that could change everything.